Please be seated. Good evening and welcome to the Council meeting. I'm Councillor Will Lane, the Mayor. In June 2017, 72 of our residents tragically lost their lives in the fire at Grenfell Tower. I ask every member of the Council to pay our deepest and continuing respects in the conventional manner now by marking the moment with 72-second silence. Would everybody please stand? Please be seated. Item number 1 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of October 2024. The minutes have been circulated and an updated copy is in the additional papers pack. Are the minutes agreed? Item number 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary or any other significant interest in any item being considered at tonight's meeting? Item number 3, special announcements by the Mayor. Nominations have opened for the Mayor's Award 2025. The annual awards, which are now in their 25th year, celebrate the achievements of individuals, groups, and organisations that have gone above and beyond to improve local life in the borough. If you know of any individual, group, or organisation that has made an outstanding contribution to local life, then please do share their story by nominating them for a Mayor's Award in the following 3 relevant categories: individual contribution, young achiever, voluntary and community sector organisation. Nominations can be made online by visiting the Council's website. If you need the nomination form in an alternative format, please do contact the Mayor's office. Nominations close at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 20th of January 2025. I shall now ask the Chief Executive to report apologies for absence or lateness from this meeting.
Thank you. I've received apologies from Councillors Hamish Adurian, Quentin Marshall and Sydney Yankson, and I've also received apologies for lateness from Councillors Sonia Svedenik and Janet Evans.
Mr Mayor, can I also add Councillor Larry and Councillor Toby Benton for lateness?
Thank you, Councillor Ali.
And, Mr Mayor, sorry, Councillor Siren.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor. Item number 5 is public speaking. For the benefit of members and those watching, please start your 5 minutes by saying who you are and if you are speaking on your own behalf or for others. Please keep your contribution to 5 minutes so that all speakers have a fair and equal opportunity to be heard. Given that this is an important topic, may I invite all speakers to be respectful of the time allocation for other speakers. Miss Mariam, excuse me. Mr. Nabil Shakir, could you please address the Council?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I want to say thank you for giving us a chance to speak and to hear our voices, because it's really important. I want to welcome the Council and thank them in looking into discrimination, which is very important. And only then will we have a change when it's done. So I thank you for when you do it. And I also want to thank the councillors for their apology. I welcome it, and I'm sure many families do. It's very important that you accept and understand what families have gone through and help and support them. I welcome and thank the Grenfell Service Repair. They have done a tremendous service, and they have set an example far beyond what we look to see from the service that they have provided. It is a clear example of what they have achieved for the families. Is very helpful and very easing for them. And it is a good example of many other services that if they could follow suit to them, then we'd have a better service within the council, and I'm sure we can all work on this together. I and many of the families would like to see, especially the families that I work with within Grenfell Tower Trust, would like to see the future dedicated service carrying on and supporting the families for many years to come, long after it is due to finish, I believe, in 3 more years' time. Or 4, shall I say. The ongoing support is still needed. There is much more help that is required. Their pain and suffering is still immense, and it will take a long time and for them to recover, because they haven't had a chance to recover. It has always been an ongoing fight, an ongoing request to help one another, to request from council, we need this, to request from the government, we need change, to request from the police, we need prosecution, to request from the memorial, we need this, that. It is an ongoing request. They have not had time to grieve. I ask upon the council all council members to help support the family, give them priority to the people that still need the ongoing help and service. The dedicated service helped people. The future service is helping the families and everyone else, and we still need the ongoing support. We thank you for what you have done, and we really do appreciate it. And it's only your help and your support can we try to get on with our lives. We don't want to be where we are, but unfortunately we are where we are. And in doing so, you know, by working together, only can we see that Kensington RBKC becomes the best fitting council that it should be amongst all the other council members in London. You can achieve a good service, and you can all do this. And we know by working together, you know, and supporting one another, that you can become the best council within Greater London. And I thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Mr. Shakir. I'm now going to invite Ms. Zabahian to speak on behalf of Sultan Shakir. Ms. Zabahian, would you please address the Council?
Thank you very much. I'm going to read out a statement that Sultan Shakir has just written, and she's sitting over there. My name is Sultan Shakir. I was a resident of the Tower, and I also lost 6 members of my immediate family. My mother, Syria Shakir, my sister Nadia, my brother-in-law Bassem, and my 3 nieces, Zainab, Mirna, and Fatima, aged 3, 11, and 14, 3 of the 18 children killed. I want to tell you that it's been chaos from the beginning after the fire. This council was left in charge, and it was confused.com. We are the ones who should have been confused because of what happened, but we have had to chase them and sort things out to this day. It is pathetic. The council should never have been left in charge of the disaster, as they were one of the main culprits. It just didn't make sense. Everything has been a fight and struggle with this council. We had key workers who came and went. Nothing was ever clear, and it still isn't. We shouldn't have to chase. They mucked us about. When you tell your key workers something, they say, I don't know. We had to find out things for ourselves. We were not in a fit state to manage all the confusion that this council created. The way they dealt with it all was so unfair. There were no systems, so it created a lot of division and family splits. It created unfairness, which we are struggling with to this day. The council now talks about change, but I don't know what has changed. I still don't know what you've done. I try not to deal with the council at all. I try to go through my key worker, which helps if you have a good key worker. That can make the difference, but it's usually not been a very good experience. I also want to say you need to stop changing them every couple of years. We let someone into our lives, the details of our situation. We have to get used to them, and they have to get to know us, but then they change. We need stability in key workers. You need to hire people who stay for the long term, because we need that continuity. It is really annoying when you put people in the system who come and go. Their contracts need to be for at least 4 years, and some sort of provision to deter them from leaving. You put people into the system who were terrible. I don't know who does your hiring. All the confusion could have been avoided if you got some proper people in instead of learning on the job, with one blaming the other. You do need to change to make things better for us, especially the immediate families, because we lost not just our homes, but our flesh and blood in a terrible, horrific, terrifying way, and that will never change. But you ignore all that. Your staff dealing with the immediate families need to be of higher experience and capability and have answers for everything. If there's a problem, they need to be able to solve it straight away and answer questions, instead of being just a link in a chain to say, oh, I'll get back to you, and then we have to keep chasing again. We are worn out by this council's incompetence. If by now they don't have responses immediately, then I don't know what hope there is. The council staff have no power to do anything, and as always will get back to you, just like the night of the fire, with the LFB, the London Fire Brigade, saying, stay put to my family, when it was obvious their policy was not the right response, but no one can react quickly enough to make a difference. It's the same thing, too much bureaucracy and too slow. We need urgent attention and services and response to the needs of us, the immediate families now, because you are in charge, but you don't seem to care about the impact of what you did and what you're continuing to do to us. From the NHS response to the council, it has been terrible, and there's been nowhere to go. I hope the government is listening. They should never have left this council in charge, and they should never have treated us this way after the fire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
And now, Ms. Zebahian, I invite you to speak on your own behalf.
Well, actually, it's not on my behalf, but thank you. I'm Kimia, the advocate for Grenfell next of kin. These are the immediate families of those killed due to state and corporate negligence in the Grenfell Tower fire catastrophe. I use the word catastrophe because language matters. I use the word killed because they did not die, they were killed. They are not bereaved, they are next of kin. Everyone has a mother, a father, a brother, sister, husband, wife, partner, son, daughter, grandparents, and grandchildren. Each one precious with a gap left that cannot be filled. So when this council talks of change, nothing can be said to have changed if you have still not recognized this fundamental fact of human existence anywhere in the world. We're not animals. We have kin, just like you. Maybe some of you could imagine putting yourselves in their shoes. Imagine for a minute if you lost your parents, children, siblings, partners in this way, sometimes an entire family. Imagine if you can, and then we can talk about change. The fundamental problem here was that the very same council that was at the heart of this disaster and identified as such right at the very start was left in charge of the disaster and then the recovery. One next of kin put it as, it's like being locked in the house with your abuser. Another said it was leaving criminals in charge of the crime scene. But this is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, with 38 embassies and high commissions, a royal palace, which was at the time the home of the future king and queen, boasting of the most expensive real estate in the country, and the money laundering epicenter of the UK, often highlighted in Netflix documentaries. Yet a jewel in the crown of the Tory party in office at the time, with half the cabinet and prime ministers living just up the road. It would have been too embarrassing to bring in commissioners, but it should have happened and would have if it were anywhere else in the country. It is unforgivable that the perpetrators were left in charge, more concerned with their PR image and reputational damage and protecting self-interest. The families of those killed were kicked from pillar to post and re-traumatized. But let us drill down to specifics. If commissioners had been brought in, there would have been some level of scrutiny and accountability, systems put in place that would have made the last 7+ years less traumatizing. If there was any effective scrutiny, hundreds of millions of pounds would not have been wasted, with senior council officers saying on the record, we don't know where the money went, and that is the problem. As we speak, there is still no value for money certification signed off from 2017 onwards, a necessary requirement for audits to be complete. Whilst hundreds of millions of pounds poured in from central government, this council cannot answer what it did with all the money, offering vague explanations of Grenfell recovery and support, when no one can see or felt the impact of this so-called support. So we ask central government to safeguard the public purse and the families of those killed who feel the death of their kin has been exploited, by establishing a Grenfell Commissioner to examine what happened to the financial contributions of the taxpayer, central government and RBKC residents. The inquiry skipped over the aftermath, and that was a failing of the inquiry. It examined only the first week after the fire and took evidence for only 3.5 short days and called on one minister for a cosy chat. It did not drill down to the post-disaster mess, which was very badly handled by this council, culpable and under criminal investigation, yet left in charge of the disaster and the traumatized victims. Since the disbanding of the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee, there has been no formal accountability or effective challenge. This imbalance of power between the council leadership and its opposition, as it is with its residents, is too great and far too important, not only for those in North Kensington caught up in this web of incompetence, corruption and exploitation, but for the wider learning that is necessary after such an epic disaster. These functions have to be put in place externally. Those who were in leadership positions before and in the immediate aftermath of the fire hold leadership positions now. So what changed? We ask if it is time for new leadership and cabinet. The machinations of RBKC and certain areas and officers is closer to a medieval court of favours, cronies, and death by 1,000 cuts to put Wolf Hall to shame. The inquiry notes that the TMO refused to recognise groups which came together to raise issues on behalf of other residents of the tower, including the Grenfell Action Group and the Grenfell Compact.
Ms. Sababihan, your 5 minutes has expired. Could you please conclude?
To recap, RBKC was culpable in this disaster, yet left in charge of the aftermath and recovery. That was a political decision, not a humane one, and it served the council well as it continues to draw down for more funding from central government whilst brutalising the victims. It continues to mark its own homework. There are serious issues around finances, and a commissioner needs to be appointed to examine the records. There is still no value for money certification for the accounts of this council, and auditors cannot sign off the audit. We request from central government external scrutiny, a commissioner to examine the past and the finances, and any new money requested by this council to be tied to robust
Could you please conclude your remarks?
A change of governance with more integration by councillors in the north of the borough, across the council, senior governance and cabinet. It is not long, well, we just want an end to this medieval court system of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea.
Thank you. Ms. Melanie Wolfe, would you please address the council for up to 5 minutes?
Thank you. Good evening. I am Melanie Junior Wolfe. I founded and run North Kensington Community Kitchen with a fantastic, dedicated cohort of local volunteers who help make this happen and who live on our estates in social, council and housing association housing. We serve our community in North Kensington, including hostels, nurseries, estates and old people's homes, and have a strong knowledge of what is happening across our community. The questions we put to you below have been gathered through our engagement with our people as our community response to your own response to the Grenfell Tower Public Inquiry Phase 2 report. We've put together 8 queries from our community to which we would greatly appreciate an answer. Safety is a paramount concern. Our traumatised community do not have adequate mental health support. Knife and gun crime is becoming more indiscriminate and shocking. Our community are in shock at the shooting of an 8-year-old child on our streets at 5:30 p.m. on a Sunday. we need cross-party positive engagement and all stakeholders to hold a forum and provide the whole of North Kensington with a long-term plan. When will RBKC robustly support us in seeking support, policing and justice for victims of crime? Next. RBKC has the worst school exclusion rate in the country, impacting many of our families and further reducing opportunity, also leading in some cases to crime. How will this, alongside refocus rooms and managed moves, be investigated and improved upon by RBKC at all of our schools? Next. We are dealing with the ramifications of years of cuts and skills loss across child and youth services. Given the lack of opportunity or social mobility for our children, will RBKC assure us that no more child, youth or SEN services will be cut? Next. The worst child poverty statistics in London or the UK are in North Kensington. In particular, Golborne, Delgado and Nottingdale wards. This is a shameful indictment of one of the wealthiest areas on earth. How will RBKC robustly engage in looking at the vast inequalities and the ongoing impact this has across our society, be it in education, exclusions, health and well-being, or basic safety and crime? Further, how will RBKC now support and include those of us engaged at the grassroots level? Next, there is not fairness in access or support. We share food, nutrition, legal support, and advice and friendship across North Kensington. How will RBKC ensure fairness and stop the silos, stopping access for the silent majority of thousands of people? Next. We note that there are no North Kensington councillors on the senior leadership team, and that there is a distinct lack of a new generation of councillors across parties. We are further concerned about the bias of one or two RBKC councillors. We request that all councillors are given adequate advanced training for their role and understand the need to engage the Nolan principles, to declare interests and to serve all of their residents, not only a few. Can you assure us that this will be looked at and that all serving councillors will be held to the standards needed to meet the demands of our traumatised community? Next. Despite us constantly asking, including at Grenfell scrutiny committees, when there were some, how and when will RBKC include housing associations in discussions and ensure they also meet accountability, bearing in mind that many of our people are at the mercy of housing associations, many living in very cramped, unhygienic conditions? Next. We need a wider range of voices at the table. Too many are excluded as they don't feel there is a place for them. We want a truly independent scrutiny procedure that we and all stakeholders can all be a part of and engage with for North Kensington, with the vision of creating a better, more positive future for us all. Please explain what independent scrutiny for North Kensington will look like in practice and how there will be an inclusive balance of voices and robust accountability. We look forward.
Ms. Wolfe, your 5 minutes has expired. Could you please conclude?
We look forward to your answers and sharing them with our many community stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfe. Ms. Badani, would you please address the Council for up to 5 minutes?
Sure. Good evening, members of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I have sat here before you for too many times, possibly more times than some of you may have wished. So tonight I will do things differently. I will present the way I have done in the last 16 years. I will present the way I have before your peers, before MPs, before the Cabinet Office, before the European Parliament, before the European Commission, and before the European Council. I will do so to cling to some hope that we will see some change, as opposed to resistance, at times frankly unacceptable, insulting and disrespectful behavior from those who are meant to serve me. So tonight, while I speak, I will ask you to bear with me and to either close your eyes or look away and forget for 5 minutes that I am a social tenant, that I am one of your residents. It is clear that following the tragedy of Grenfell Tower, we are at a pivotal, is that working or seems to be? We are at a pivotal moment in our community's history. The impact of that disaster resonates deeply in the lives of countless individuals, those who survived, those who lost loved ones, and those who continue to rebuild their lives in the wake of such loss. This moment calls not only for remembrance, but deep reflection and for systemic change. It is essential that the lessons of Grenfell, painful though they are not lost in the midst of political or administrative processes. We must understand as a community and you as a local authority that the residents you serve are not simply stakeholders. They are your foundation, your partners, and above all, your responsibility. This tragedy has exposed a fundamental flaw in the way a local authority operates, and an unfortunate reality that has to change if we are ever to rebuild trust and create a future where no one is overlooked or undervalued. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the cultural shift that must occur in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. I will outline some key recommendations for creating a system where residents, particularly those in social housing, feel heard, valued, and empowered in decisions that affect their lives. We must address a fundamental issue: the Council's increasing adoption of a corporate identity that forgets its true purpose to serve the borough, the people of this borough. Recommendation number 1, reinstate resident-centered governance. The first and most urgent recommendation is to reinstate a resident-centered governance model. Too often, decisions are made by people and with your trusted partners who are disconnected from the lived reality of those they serve. This has to change. For too long a time, your VCS have acted as a proxy community representative. The service provider or so-called service providers jumping on the bandwagon and coming to tell you what we need, as if we as residents are incapable of speaking for ourselves. I didn't expect to see a live example tonight, but here we are. I'm not here to tell you how the work I do has served over 29,000 children across the capital, or how we distributed the equivalent of 3.6 million worth of goods in 4 years. This is not the place for it. Tonight, service providers do not get to play with our lives. In the case of Grenfell, it became tragically clear that the voices of residents were not heard in critical decision-making processes. We need to ensure that residents are meaningfully included at every stage of the decision-making process, whether it's in housing policies, fire safety measures, or community services. Residents should not be treated as passive recipients of services, but as active collaborators in shaping the policies that affect them. This means creating regular structured opportunities for you residents to engage directly with you through community-led initiatives and at a strategic level with properly mandated residents' representatives. The voices of those in social housing must be given equal weight in the halls of power. Without this, any efforts at change will remain hollow. Second, there needs to be a new system for accountability and transparency that shifts away from corporate interests to prioritize public service. The adoption of corporate identity within the Council has resulted in a culture that often forgets its true duty to serve residents with compassion, integrity, and responsiveness. Too often, the priorities of efficiency, image, and compliance overshadow the voices of vulnerable residents. I'm going to jump because I think I'm going to be out of time. Third, the Council needs to rebuild trust with the community through genuine partnerships. Trust is not earned through statements or good intention, but through consistent, tangible action. It is essential that RBKC makes a long-term commitment to investing in the relationships with its most vulnerable residents, especially those in social housing. This is not about periodic consultation, but creating real, sustained partnerships with communities at the grassroots level. Part of this means redefining the Council's relationship with social housing. Social housing...
Ms. Badani, your 5 minutes has expired. Would you please conclude?
We'll try. So I'll jump to recommendation number 4. Unfortunately, the public inquiry requires quite a lot of an in-depth response. The Council should urge the leadership of the RBKC to lead with humility and accountability. We stand at a crossroads. The aftermath of Grenfell Tower cannot be allowed to fade into history as just another tragic event. It must be a turning point. RBKC has the opportunity to reshape the future of this borough, not with platitudes or policies that look good on paper, but real, tangible cultural change that values every resident, that recognizes the dignity of all people, and that fosters a genuine partnership between residents and local authority. This isn't just about avoiding future tragedies, it's about creating a culture where residents, you residents, particularly those in social housing, are empowered to shape the decisions that impact their lives. A culture where the Council is not a distant corporate entity, but a deeply embedded partner in every community's journey towards safety and justice. Let us honour the lives affected by Grenfell by committing to this change now and for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Badani. I'll now invite Ms. Nahid Ashby to please address the Council for up to 5 minutes.
Good evening. I'm going to be very brief and I'm going to keep to the point because this was about reflecting on your report to the Grenfell inquiry. So as we gather to reflect on that Grenfell report, I'm struck by a profound sense of déjà vu. Once again, we are presented with words that promise change, words that express regret, and words that commit the learning lessons. But for many of us who lived through the tragedy and continue to carry its weight, words mean nothing. We have seen reports, we have seen recommendations and regrets before, we have heard apologies, and yet we are here today not with mended wounds, but with the same aching questions. Why did it happen? And why did it take so long to acknowledge the systemic failures that led to it? And why should we believe that this time is going to be different? The tower itself was a monument to a system driven by prejudice and contempt, a system that prioritized politics and profits over people. The report may highlight individual collective failures, but let us be clear. The failures that led to Grenfell fire were systemic. They were embedded in the culture that had no respect for residents. But if Grenfell has taught you anything, it is that the toxic culture, the attitude and behaviors should be the foundation on which safe, responsive and fair governance stands. Without it, even the best policies may fall short. And if we are to honour the lives lost, we need more than just technical fixes and policy changes. We need a reflective shift in culture, a commitment to treating every resident with the empathy, dignity and respect that they deserve. It is your responsibility to ensure that that culture change permeates every level of governance. What we need is evident and perceptible change. We need an unequivocal commitment to accountability, transparency, and a system overhaul. Regulations, tenant rights, and council accountability must be reformed across the board. We've heard that no one should have experienced what Grenfell residents endured. But to prevent that, we need more than hollow reassurances. We need every decision maker to feel the weight of what happened, to live with the urgency that we live every day. Grenfell was not just a tragedy, it was a crime against humanity, against decency, against a fundamental human right. And until those responsible are held to account, until systemic change is evident, trust will remain out of reach. I want to end with a message to the Council and to the government. Hopefully they are listening. And to anyone who has the power to enact change. We are watching, we are listening, and we will not be silenced. Grenfell's legacy is not yours to control. It belongs to the departed, the survivors, and the community that refuses to let this tragedy be forgotten. Let's not simply publish a report and confine it to the archives. Let's rebuild trust, restore humanity, and make Grenfell the last time we as a community have to bear the unbearable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashby. Ms. Vasiliki Stavru-Lorraine, I invite you to please address the Council for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. A few words prepared by Fatima Mohammed and Samiha Mansour from Lancaster West Estate, and myself, Vasiliki Stavru-Lorraine from Bramley House, to reflect some issues to do with the affected residents of our respective estates, but neglected residents following the disaster. So my subject is justice not served. Councillors, at this full council meeting, the residents of Bramley House and Lancaster West Estate would like to address and bring their concerns to your attention. Following the aftermath of the Grenfell disaster, the councillors of this borough have continued to assure us that justice and fairness will be served to all those on the affected estates surrounding Grenfell who have been traumatized will be taken care of. As a result of their horrific experiences, a large number of vulnerable, weak and disabled residents have been seriously impacted and traumatized physically, emotionally and mentally. Yet they have not received help that they require. This includes lack of reliable communication by the council and the legal representatives who were involved in the inquiry to help those who were affected as a result of this unfortunate disaster. This amounts to a serious neglect of the borough's duty of care to the affected residents. The affected residents in Bramley House and Lancaster West Estate require clarification regarding fair treatment and justice given by the relevant authorities post-Grenfell. We would like you to assure us that you have followed the Code of Practice of the Equality Act 2010 and the Disability Discrimination Act 1995. The residents were assured at the time that there would be justice for all. There was the promise that fair compensation would be made to those who were eligible, yet we have been ignored. Where is equality? We are aware that only very few of the so-called affected residents have received the compensation, and this was secretly awarded. No one was allowed to know what was given and on what grounds they were given this compensation. This compensation should be put in the public domain, as it is only fair for the sake of the transparency, and we therefore ask that this is made accessible to all. At this meeting, we trust that the residents will be heard and in turn receive the necessary advice that will lead to possible ways in order to remedy this situation and to be able to achieve fairness, equality and justice for all. We and the residents ask that you now meet with us to discuss in which this injustice can be remedied, failing which we will take action. We will take it further, as well as up with our local MP, Joe Powell, and ask him to take the matter of the Parliamentary Ombudsman, as we have been unjustly treated. At the moment, the community is very divided as a result of the double standards. I would like to close by bringing to your attention that certain residents were awarded monies prior to the publication of the Grenfell Inquiry report. This report identified those who were responsible for the Grenfell tragedy. In other words, compensation had been illegally awarded to certain individuals before a defendant had been identified. How can this be legally possible? We, the affected from Bramley House and Lancaster West, who have been ignored, therefore ask for equal treatment. Our families and children feel very heartbroken every time our neighbours who have been compensated talk about going on holidays, etc. Our pain and grievance have not been acknowledged, and we ask that you now acknowledge us. We also ask for an official apology, and we now want to see action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Stavro-Lorraine. Mr. David O'Connell, would you now please address the Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for this opportunity to speak. I'm returned to this meeting. I came to the last meeting to speak about the estate I live on, Lancaster West, and what was happening with the residents there. And I know Elizabeth Campbell came down to the estate to visit and see what was happening. And she said to me, seeing this in real life brings home what is going on and what is happening to your residents and what people are living through and what they have been living through here. Yet I'm back here again because this is the response to the report. And one of the things you talked about is better engagement, talking to people and engaging. So I had to come to a council meeting to get anyone to talk to me and respond about this. And I had to then, when I responded to Elizabeth Campbell and asked her what we wanted for the estate and what we wanted for independent oversight of what was happening there, nothing came back. And my main problem has been, through all of this, is that the council will ignore you and silo you if you complain about things. People do not want to come here and complain. People do not want to be seen to be asking the council because it will tar them in the council's mind. And I find all of this is a nice show, but the words do not seem to mean very much, because the culture change you have talked about doesn't seem to be evident in what happens on the ground. The residents I live with, I see complaints from people on a regular basis, and the responses from the council officers and the people talking to them, and remember this is the neighbourhood team, who are your flagship new way of dealing with things, are to say, oh, that can't be true. Oh, no, surely not. Maybe I'll come and check that myself, and to belittle what their complaints are and say, oh, there's some easy solution for you. So I don't ask for a simple solution, because there isn't a simple solution. We are suffering through this refurbishment, which is far larger than any of the major works that you've carried out so far on the rest of the borough, but there is no realistic or practical solution to how people will be able to live through these works. And Elizabeth, you've seen them. I mean, you've seen the damage they do. I was going to make a more prepared and carefully written speech when I came today, but I've spent the last 2 days dealing with my partner, who has very severe PTSD, and the noise and disruption of this led to her being completely traumatized again. So I've come here to ask you, in an emotive manner I know, but to say, please, can we look at the way and the systems that the council have? The things you talk about in the report are all the things that are missing. There is no systematic way of dealing with people. Everyone is treated as an individual case. Some people, if they like you, do well. Other people are ignored. There should always be a set of rules. I think the important thing, and the things that the inquiry highlighted, was that there was a lack of a grown-up, sophisticated culture in the council. And I think that's the thing you need to establish. And you need to establish proper culture change for the people who are making those decisions, because it is the management decisions that are causing these problems. There are lots of very good people who work for the council. There are lots of good people who try and find a way through the system. But often they leave because either they get so frustrated that there is nothing they can do. And one final point I would make is, of all the complaints to the Ombudsman, RBKC's highest by at least 30–40% are all about housing. They're all about stock condition, and they're all about the way they're handled by the council. So I think 7.5 years later, we do not seem to have gone through much of a significant culture change. And I would like to see that on, since we are the flagship in Lancaster West, we are your grand new way of doing things. I would love to feel that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. And as Mayor, I would like to express my thanks to all those who have spoken here tonight. Councillor Campbell, would you like to respond?
Yes, and I will respond firstly by saying, actually I'm going to sit down because it's easier, to apologise, but everyone's had 5 minutes each, but I've only got 5 minutes to respond, so necessarily it'll be a little bit of skating here. So first of all, I'd like to thank Nabil for his words. I know, and I also want to thank him for being on the steering group of the dedicated service. I think that's been incredibly helpful, having his input into it. And I just want to re-emphasize what he said about the dedicated service really needs to set a standard for everyone across the council. He's absolutely right. And I would also like to say we do want to become the best council in London. So thank you to Nabil for pointing that out. And I think everyone in this chamber wants this council to be the best. And finally, I'd like to thank him for his generosity of spirit and his warm-heartedness. Kimia, you spoke for Sorsan and for the next of kin. We absolutely accept that in the aftermath it was chaotic and this council failed people. And as the inquiry report in front of us says, people felt abandoned by this council. And we have been absolutely clear that we accept all the findings in the report, including that one. I hope, though, Kimia, when you're reading the report, you will see that there is evidence that we have changed since 2017. We laid out very clearly where we have changed, but we also accept there is more change that we need to do, and we've laid out the areas in the report where we think we need to achieve that. Melanie, knife crime. I mean, oh my Lord, we've had, I think, 9 shootings this year, 6 which have involved people being shot at or killed, and a huge and many children, and it's just totally unacceptable. If you stay, I'm going to refer to it in my speech later, because I mean it's just out of control. You've given me a whole list of things. I'm afraid I can't go through them one by one, but I will make sure that you have a proper reply. But one I do want to pick up when you say, there are 2 things actually. You said councillors need training, they need to accept the Nolan principles and serve all of us, all of us residents, and I absolutely 100% concur to that. And our training is much better, but there is always more things we can do. The one thing I do want to just draw out is when you were talking about scrutiny. And you were talking about, you didn't know how the independent external scrutiny of our culture is going to, how it's going to work. And I think what we've just said in this report is that we need to do that. We absolutely need external scrutiny, because as people who I met in various of the community meetings were saying, well, you can't mark your own homework. Well, we accept that. The scope of the external scrutiny, we need to decide between councillors and residents what it's going to involve, etc. But I'm very glad it's in the report that that's what we intend to do. Samia, it's always good to see you, as always. You're talking about engaging directly with the council, and I'd say it's been great to see you at community meetings, engaging with us directly. And also, thank you very much for you and Nahid coming to see me as well, in addition to that. And you say again, no one should be overlooked and undervalued. And I don't know if you've read the report, but I think there's one paragraph which I'm going to read out, because I think it really refers exactly to what you're feeling. And it's paragraph 26 on page 41, or page 9 of the report. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I might just have like 3 more minutes over, because I've got so many other people to respond to.
I will allow that, but I will also allow
Yes,
Councillor Ali more time as well.
I just think this paragraph is really fundamental into what Samia is asking. And it says, the residents have asked us to set out what kind of culture we want at the council. We want to build an organisational culture based on fairness, respect and humanity. We want everyone who relies on the council, no matter their background, to feel listened to, cared for and understood. We want strong relationships with residents, especially people living in our social housing or in temporary accommodation. This is what we want the lasting legacy from Grenfell at the council to be. So that's just to say that we really take on board what Sammy has said, and it is, our response is in the report. Finally, why should anyone believe that this time is different? How can we trust you? I think that's what Nahid's main point was. And I would say, if you look under the culture things, what we're saying in this report is an independent advisory panel, independent external scrutiny, our internal scrutiny strengthened, engagement with external bodies strengthened, like the housing, social housing regulator, the building safety regulator, so emergency resilience across London, people looking at us. So a lot of external bodies looking at what we're doing as well, to make sure that we aren't marking our own homework. Finally, Vasily, we say justice is not served and hasn't been served in the surrounding estates. I accept that people really have felt a huge amount of division since Grenfell Tower tragedy, and I do hope that the restorative justice programme that will be rolling out under the future Grenfell support will help alleviate some of that. And Sarah, I know, would be very happy to come and meet you and talk about that in more depth. And finally, David, great to see you here, great to see you the other day. Complaints, you're saying, well, what's the point of complaining? Is anything ever done about it? Yes, we're looking at an end-to-end review of our complaints procedure. Since I've spoken to you, have taken your complaints seriously. I've had a meeting with your chair of the Residents Association. I know Soft's come to a committee meeting down at Lancaster West, hearing things, and exactly what you've been pointing out, that it's absolutely hell to live in a building site, and how can we make some things better, even whether it's small things, just by saying, by the way, between Monday and Friday we will be drilling. So just basic things that I know that she's looking into and discussing with you. And when you say housing is at the root, and repairs that are at the root of a lot of the things that people are talking about, culture in the council, I would absolutely agree with you. I think that's exactly what we heard in the community meetings where you were at, which I was, other meetings with bereaved and survivors, almost like two sides of the coin, is what are we doing about where we bump up to residents most, and that's in our housing. How do we make that really, really good, our service? And it can't just be our professional service that we give, it's how do our officers behave, not only with utter professionalism, but also with humanity and with humility. Thank you.
Councillor Ali, I will allow you extra time. If you don't use it, I'll allow members of your group more time. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I thank each and everyone for who are here today, this evening to speak and for really spending this evening with us. So I'll start by naming them all. Saswan Shakur, Nabil Shakur, Kimia, Melanie, Samia, and Nahid, as well as Fasalika and David, as well as those who put their names down to speak but couldn't join us for this evening, like Mariam Yusuf, Kareem, as well as Shah. Thank you for considering to come to this council. I understand 5 minutes is not a good enough time to address all the issues you've mentioned, but let me respond to some of them as, or most of them, as the leader of the Labour group. First thing I will start with, Saswan, you've mentioned confused, and I understand confused is what we all felt. I was not a councillor when Grenfell happened, and in fact I've met that night at the fire, the first time ever I've witnessed such a horrible incident, and I've never ever will forget that, and everyone else that I have met will remember that night. Yes, the local community have taken the initiatives to support the bereaved and survivors, and I happen to be one of them who was there at that night. And it led me to be here to seek justice for the residents, for the bereaved and survivors, as well as for the entire residents. So I understand the feeling you have, and I've joined when I was an ordinary citizen before I was elected to support the local community, and I will continue to do so. Looking into the services that the council has been providing, and specifically about the stability, that's an issue. When bereaved and survivors and people who have the next of kin really need the services and the support that they want to get, they want to build friendship and understanding those who are supporting them. Because I remember individuals who survived at the tower that I will not name now, but where they live in my ward. I get to know them the first beginning, in fact the first day of the fire, and to this day we're friends and we still support. And I understand the importance of having that long-term understanding and relationship. So when the key workers are appointed to the council, and I'm sure the council leadership will look into this, they should give them the time and the energy and the sources that they need to continue so that they can provide the services that people, when they open their lives to them, so that they cannot just keep changing and newcomers each time to get used to. So I understand that's a very, very important. Nabil has mentioned very good important point is for the council, after 7 years, that at least the council is now looking into the discrimination. 7 years on, and apologies, as well as welcoming now the change of the dedicated services. And I understand finally the council is taking notice, and I'm really pleased that Nabil has come this evening and to thank for what the leadership is doing. But it took them 7 years. He was here last meeting and he will continue to be here. But I am thanking for his time to come. Kimia mentioned the killing of residents, the word she used, the killing of the residents, and I understand where she stands when she mentioned calling for commissioners. But the council, who is part of what has happened, in fact, in my previous speech, Mr. Mayor, I have mentioned that RBKC Council is the link between all the defendants. Therefore, this council should not be taking the leadership, not only to say into providing services, but looking into it. The government should have been involved long time ago. And this is what we have called our last statement, for commissioners to look into the service delivery, as well as specifically Grenfell and the neighboring areas. So that's what we have done before. And I understand when Kimia speaks on behalf of residents on this point. It's not new to us. We have called it before, and we will continue. As long as the council we feel is not changing, we will continue to press for that. Again, has been mentioned the safety, and I'm sure I'll be including Melanie, the safety of our residents is really paramount concern for our residents, especially the shooting in Goulburn and other areas, and the victims of crime, that we cannot continue this to happen, and all the way, especially as, again, you've mentioned the school exclusion, which is important point. Education is a pathway to prosperity, and I have attended with the mayor a couple of events, of educational events to support, which I will thank later on the mayor. So for that reason, I thank you for taking that point and really bringing into home that education is a pathway to prosperity, and school exclusion, specifically in our borough, is the highest in the country, and that should never be the case. So I think most of the residents who come here this evening understand the culture change. If I were to really conclude the point of culture change of the council, David mentioned it took him, again, he was here last meeting, David O'Connell, and now he's here, and he's specifically talking about the main issue that's related to the council issue, which is the housing. Grenfell was a housing disaster, and it continues to be an issue for our residents to speak about. I understand that he's mentioned the leader of the council were at the meeting and met with him, but again, there was a need for the residents to come back to this evening and mention it again. I hope that the leadership can work with all residents and to make sure that residents do not have to come this evening and to speak in front of the council, as well as in front of the whole borough, to mention all these issues. I think it's about time for the leadership to deeply think about the culture change that they have been promising for many, many years. And I think 7 years is a long time. And as I said before, I think Melanie mentioned the leadership on the local councillors and the Labour councillors, as well as the councillors in the north of the borough, to work. I think we have to respect the mandates that have been given, and that's why we're here to speak the mandate that have been given to govern, but we are here to hold them accountable. But I'm sure there will be a way, the leadership and all councillors, to work together to make sure that there's the best possible service is provided for our residents, and that's ultimately what you've been charged, not those who voted for you, but those who didn't vote for you, and delivering an equal borough for all our residents. And on that note, we are happy to work with. We may not be in a sharing power because we respected the mandate, and that the time will come to speak on that, but we're more than happy to work with them. And I understand the need for local councillors, especially North Kensington councillors, to get a greater say in their areas so that we can all serve our local communities. Once again, thank you for coming, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item number 6 is petitions. Do members have any petitions to present? Item number 7 is a statement by the Leader of the Council and response by the Leader of the Opposition Group. I understand that the whips have a proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under Standing Order 42, I wish to move that Standing Order 30 be suspended this evening to allow Councillor Campbell and Councillor Ali up to 10 minutes each for their speeches.
Is that seconded?
Second.
Is that agreed? I now then invite the Leader of the Council, Councillor Campbell, to address the meeting for up to 10 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, tonight I'll be setting out this organisation's full and final response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy. It is a seminal moment, and one that will shape the council I lead in the months and years to come. But before I do, we also need to touch on something that has become all too present, and which Melanie referred to. Mr. Mayor, on Sunday night, yet another shooting, yet another child caught in the crossfire, and this time only 8 years old. I said in a statement on Monday that we are all shocked to hear of this mindless violence, but on reflection, are we? In a matter of months, 9 shootings in our borough, people being shot at and killed with increasing regularity and on our streets. Now a child and father shot and injured just a few streets away from where Renee Graham, aged 15, was shot and killed at a family fun day. It beggars belief that a child has been caught in the crossfire of our violence on our streets once again, and my thoughts are with all those who are affected. Residents are concerned, and in fact, more than concerned. For many years, we've been told that the crime problem in Kensington and Chelsea is one of perception. It is not the case. Guns and knives are on our streets, crime is the problem, and we need to see an immediate response. I've asked for an urgent meeting with the local Chief Inspector, and I'm writing to the Mayor of London and the Chief of the Met Police. At the moment, whatever the Mayor of London thinks he's doing, it is not working. And I refuse to sit back and accept a London like this. I expect a visible police presence to remain in place for the foreseeable future in an area of London that should now be flashing bright red on the Met and the Mayor's priority list. Mr. Mayor, it's impossible to make a sufficient bridge from that topic to the one I expected to talk about tonight. So I hope colleagues will forgive me in diving straight in, especially with the time allowed. Mr. Mayor, as we know, our values on the Council are respect, integrity, working together, and putting communities first. And it's with those values in mind that I want to start off with a thank you to those who've helped us shape this formal response we have in front of us. Thank you to the bereaved and survivors of Grenfell Tower. Thank you to the hundreds of people who came to community meetings. Thank you to the members of staff at the council and to the councillors who helped us shape this response. We have moved already at pace to bring this to full council, and this is an indicator of the way we want to finish what we started. Change and improve this organisation for the long term, quickly and in partnership with our communities. So far, we have found at every step a huge willingness to work with us. In the same way our communities show their commitment to us, we now have to demonstrate our commitment to them. Mr. Mayor, you can only inspire a better future when you honestly face up to the past, as we have. In September and again in our response tonight, we fully accept the findings of the inquiry and without question. I believe we are the first organisation to do so and to lay out what we'll do next. And I will also say this. The deafening silence from the companies involved in the inquiry has been palpable, and our communities have felt it. Two of our main commitments tonight centre around this aspect, and I want to be crystal clear on them this evening. One, we will rapidly set out policy to extend our ban on using companies involved in the Grenfell Tower inquiry. And two, residents will be involved in selecting and managing future contracts. Mr. Mayor, our response sets out what we will do, but it's also important to reflect on what has been done. The changes at Kensington and Chelsea have been significant. We have implemented the recommendations of the Inquiry Phase 1 report. We have made major changes in housing management, bringing housing services back in-house to continue building a more direct relationship with residents. Safety. Safety is now a fundamental part of our culture, and we are spending over £350 million on improving housing and safety right across the borough. We have established a dedicated in-house fire safety team with fire risk assessments carried out by external experts. Our resilience function has been strengthened, working in partnership with communities to ensure we are better prepared for future emergencies. We've improved and professionalised our communication service, and it is now led by community voices and responsive in times of emergency. We have made changes to building control to ensure staff are properly trained and to prioritise safety. And we involve residents in decision-making in line with a well-established charter for public participation. What remains now is a third commitment tonight, a commitment to review and improve our culture as an organisation. The way we do things will often be more important than what we actually do. Mr. Mayor, the Grenfell Tower Inquiry report set out failings that led to the death of 72 people, including 18 children. The formal response and our commitments tonight are a statement of our ambition to honour their memory. This is not an end point, but an important step. We must become the best council we can possibly be, living up to the challenge set by bereaved and survivors, and the challenge we've heard once again tonight. And of course, Mr. Mayor, in becoming the best, success or failure will ultimately be judged by residents and whether they see it and they feel it. And that is my challenge to officers and councillors present tonight. Live and breathe these commitments, make them a reality. Be proud when going over and above. Strive for high-class service always, and work with residents to solve problems and meet the emerging challenges. Mr. Mayor, the Grenfell Tower inquiry should be a defining moment, not just for this council and the community we serve, but for local government and social housing providers right across the country. The findings should make every local authority and social landlord examine their own practices and culture. The basic failures identified by the inquiry in safety, in resident engagement, in professional standards, and in emergency preparedness could exist in any organisation that has not consciously worked to prevent them. We therefore urge those across local government to go beyond minimum compliance, treat the inquiry's recommendations not as a ceiling, but as a floor. I know this will always be more profound here in KNC. It's not just change and culture. For us, it's about legacy. We know that for bereaved families and survivors, no words or promises can ever change the past, and many still feel the absence of justice and of accountability. Trust in the council, of course, remains fragile, but we commit to implementing not just the letter of the inquiry's recommendations, but the spirit of them, to maintain the highest standards of safety across all our properties, embrace residents' voice and power throughout our organisation, build a workforce that combines technical excellence with care, competence, and humanity. The memory of those who lost their lives at Grenfell Tower must always remain in our hearts.
I now invite the leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Ali, to respond for up to 10 minutes. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My response will cover three main areas this evening, Mr. Mayor. Council's response to the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 2 report, safety of our residents, and education. Education is a pathway to prosperous future for our young generation. As has been mentioned this evening, the school exclusion is an issue. So we have to thank for the organizations who are doing very well to support our young generation. I would like to thank all the organizers of RBKC Partnership Supplementary Schools Award event, which took place here at the council last month, and a special thanks to the Westway Trust educational team, to mention a few: Muna Ali Supplementary Schools Partnership Manager, Venu Dhuba, CEO of Westway Trust, and Joanna Atogdina, Community Development Manager. Congratulations to all winners on the night, in particular the two Delgado-based organizations, Delgado Supplementary School and Baraka Community Association, who have done a remarkable work to support our youngsters to stay in school and to continue their education. Our borough is also home to the British Somali graduation ceremony event, which top university graduates are awarded each and every year for their educational achievement as extracurricular activities. Therefore, I wish to extend my thanks to you, Mr. Mayor, for attending the last event and giving the top awards during the educational celebration, and mentioning that our diverse borough is a welcoming place for humanity. I extended the same thanks to the local members of Parliament, Joe Powell for Kensington and Bayswater, as well as Ben Coleman for Chelsea and Fulham, who both participated in the event and supported the residents of RBKC, which I thank them as well. Mr. Mayor, as you're well aware of, and I understand the leader of the council mentioned already, we are horrified by the news of the latest shooting of the Gulpen on last Sunday. Two people were left seriously injured, a man in his 30s and an 8-year-old girl, who thankfully in a stable condition in a hospital. I agree with the statement by our local MP, Joe Powell, who visited the area immediately after the incident. Joe wrote a statement which included, "These senseless acts of violence have no place in our streets." End of quote. I'm sure this council agrees with our local MP that keeping our residents safe is the top of our priorities. And for that reason, Mr. Mayor, I would like to respond quickly to the leader of the council. When numbers of the police are required absolutely required to be increased numbers. We know, and I do not want to play politics with this, but we know the numbers of police and the resources went down under the last Conservative government. Specifically, where this issue happened is north of the borough, and Notting Hill Police Station is or has been asked to close down by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as a Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson, rather than our London Mayor, who I know and I've met, working very hard for all Londoners. Although the local police and the local council officers have been in the area since the incident, and they have kept us informed, which I thank for their support and for their work, you can understand, Mr. Mayor, that the local residents and the community are rightly concerned for their safety after several shootings in the area, 9 shootings precisely in the neighborhood. We must all work together, Mr. Mayor, to prevent such a repeated horrific crimes that are happening in our neighborhood, in our borough, and hold those responsible to account. We, the Labour group of councillors, are once again calling for the council leadership to work with elected local councillors and the whole community to prevent such things from happening in the first place and to keep our residents safe. Mr. Mayor, tonight, as we will be debating the councillors' response on the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 2 report, I would like to thank all the residents who are still here and who have been here this evening, who spoke at the council meeting, and they share with their views about what happened and what's continued to happen and the lack of change in the council. But I also would like to thank the organizations that have supported the bereaved and survivors for the man-made Grenfell Tower fire disaster. Organizations that have been supporting our local community include, but not limited to, Grenfell Tower Trust, Grenfell United, Almanar Mosque, Westway Trust, Dalgano Community Trust, The Space, the local churches, including the St. Clement's Church, Notting Hill Methodist Church, and Central Gurdwara, as well as Holland Park Synagogue, as well as any other faith and non-faith community space for supporting our community. We councillors appreciate for what you have done when the council and other leaders of this country, especially the government, have failed to do so. So thank you for the good work you've been doing, organizations for faith and non-faith. Grenfell housing disaster has taken place in our borough, Mr. Mayor, and it will always be remembered that the council leadership failure at the highest level, where the council could not protect its residents. Many scientists and researchers agree that home is everything. Home is where we seek refuge, shelter from the world. It's where we take our first steps, where we learn about life and its ups and downs. Home is where we take the first. Home shapes us, and we shape to reflect who we have become. It's where we sleep and dreams are made. Dreams are turned into reality or are broken. Our council, under the Conservative leadership, will forever be remembered for breaking Grenfell Tower residents' dreams on that fateful night and after what happened over the 7 years on, Mr. Mayor. No one is held accountable for the disaster where we have lost 72 beloved members of our community. Everyone expected to be safe in their homes. And those who are responsible for the disaster are still living in a normal life, whereas the lives of families impacted by the disaster have changed forever. We, the local councillors, we, the local group councillors, especially the Labour councillors, together with the local community, will not rest until those responsible for the disaster are brought to justice. Mr. Mayor, Grenfell legacy must be safer homes. And I mean it again, and I will say it again, must be a safer homes for all. Homes fit for human habitation, where children can grow up, adults can retire, and most importantly, where residents in social housing are treated with the respect they deserve, as well as leaseholders and the private renters. Our residents expected from this council to fulfill the long-planned promise of a culture change. However, 7 years on, bereaved survivors and the local community are still coming to the council, and one is, as we have heard this evening, to air their views so that the council leadership hears their views and take into consideration 7 years on. Mr. Mayor, perhaps I should explain to the council leadership what change at the council means, so that this council, perhaps this time, or 7 years later, can actually listen and perhaps learn from it. The Conservative councillors and the leadership of the council knows that the Labour group that I lead have come a long way to work with them constructively under my leadership. But what we will not do is to actually accept empty promises. We will continue to work with the council leadership as long as promises that have been made to the residents are felt by residents and not coming here month after month to make sure that they are being heard all the time. Culture change in the council, Mr. Mayor, means treating residents with the respect they deserve, yet there are major issues in the housing department in particular. Culture change in the council means serving our communities, our residents equally, listening to all residents both in the south and in the north of the borough. Changing the council means, Mr. Mayor, listening to the residents and listening to residents, as some of the residents have mentioned, they perceive that within the council, racism and discrimination continues, as we have heard this evening, and the council is just starting to deal with it 7 years after. This must end ASAP. Changing the council means listening to residents and the need to reinstate the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee, which has been abolished by the Conservative Party in 2019. Changing the council means that council leadership to adhere the Charter for the Public Participation and Hillsborough Charter, which were passed after the fire. Change, and again, hopefully this time keep repeating until they hear about it. Change in the council means working with the local community and the concerns that have been raised for some of major development proposals which are being promoted by the council, which are incompatible with the charter of the public participation and the commitments of resident-led co-design and steer, including but not limited to the President Council Canal Side development and the previously Cheltenham Estate proposals. And finally, Mr. Mayor, change in the council means the need for the Conservative leadership and the council entirely to work together and respect with the elected members of the North Kensington so that we can all achieve what is best for our residents, and this council can be, as is not now, but can be the best place to live, work and study in the whole country, not just in the whole country, but not just in the country, but in the entire world. I really, we all love this borough, but we must work together to make it what it should be and what it can be for the next generation and hundreds of years to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item number 8, order of business. In accordance with the standing orders, I rule that the order of business should be amended with a written response to be given to the question to a lead member so that there is time to discuss at least one motion. Item number 9 is the council response to the Grenfell Public Inquiry Phase 2 report. All speakers on this item have 5 minutes. I invite Councillor Campbell to propose the reception of the Council's full response to the Grenfell Public Inquiry and Councillor Taylor-Smith to second. With the Council's consent, the text will be the version starting at page 21 in the additional papers that includes the additional text requested by the Labour group. Does everybody agree? That's agreed. In that case, Councillor Campbell will propose. Councillor Campbell.
I'd like to propose, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Taylor-Smith to second.
I'm pleased to second, Mr. Mayor.
The following councillors have indicated to me that they wish to speak. Councillor McVeigh, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Dr. Ahmed, Councillor El-Nahi, Councillor Thalasites, Councillor Wade, Councillor Ali, Councillor Wheel, Councillor Dentcode, Councillor Benton, Councillor Addenbrook, Councillor Bakhtiar, Councillor Lari, Councillor Kamali, Councillor Nur, Councillor Thaxter, Councillor Jeddett and Councillor Siren. Are there any other councillors not on that list who wish to speak? Please tell me now. There are a lot of speakers, so before we start, I please urge you to keep your contributions to no more than 5 minutes. Councillor McVeigh, would you like to speak for up to 5 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everyone who has spoken tonight. There is still a lot to think about and take on board. I was reflecting on this today, as just yesterday in a meeting I was referred to as a politician, which made me stop. But yes, that's true, I am a local politician, a councillor. But before I was a councillor, I was a resident who ran to help after the tragedy, like so many people in here did as well. And everyone in this chamber is a resident and a councillor. And I'd like you just to take that in mind when we are considering the response to the inquiry. Because I suppose in a way this is part of what our response to the inquiry is. One part, a human-to-human response. A response with deep sorrow and empathy for people who lost everything. Yet it also has to be a practical, organisational response. One from a local government that failed in its duties and now needs to put that right. The inquiry report laid bare not only the deception and lies by the manufacturers of building products and safety certificates that were not worth the paper they were written on, but also our failings as a council. And I'm sorry for this. Since the publication, we've held a series of meetings regarding our response, and thank you to all who attended those meetings. And we kept hearing two recurrent themes: repairs not good enough, and a change in culture needed. Regarding the change in culture, I see this as fundamental, as all officers and all councillors need to treat all residents how they'd like to be treated themselves. Like as simple as answering emails on time, responding face-to-face or on the phone politely and honestly, and being truthful if we can't give people the answers they want. And also admitting when we get things wrong and stating how we're going to make amends. And as such, I welcome the commitment in our response to the inquiry to carry out a full end-to-end review of the Council's complaints process and an independent external review of our culture. Now, secondly, repairs. And as people said tonight, often that is a housing issue. And when we took over from the TMO, we had a huge backlog of repairs. And we're currently doing about 30,000 repairs a year. And we have been putting into place some major work programs to help tackle these repairs. And to be honest, most of our repairs do go okay. But the problem is, obviously, when your repair goes wrong and your worker doesn't show up, it's an absolute nightmare. You've taken time off work, and it doesn't matter if other ones have gone right. It is not good enough, and we need to get this better, and we need to make it easier for residents to report repairs as well. And so we are introducing a reporting and tracking online repairs option, hopefully live this spring. We've talked a lot about major works in this chamber, and we have started on the refurbishment of the Silchester estate. We did listen to residents. They said no, we don't want to knock it down. And now scaffolding is up, and work has started to replace the windows and repair the concretes on this 1960s estate. And throughout the borough, we've replaced over 5,000 single glazed windows, and we've finished work on other estates. And I do just want to say one thing, that we have finished building the first new council homes in a generation. And this is thanks to my predecessor, Kim, who started on this ambitious programme since Grenfell. And these are 70 new homes now, and we are halfway through 83 new homes on Barbary Road. So in the 7 years since Grenfell, there have been changes, though, as we all acknowledge, there is still more to do, and I'm not complacent in any way. And Elizabeth said just earlier, we are committed to implementing the inquiry's report, and we are also committed to implementing it in the spirit and embracing residents' voices at every level of what we do. So finally, this report, our response to the inquiry, will hold us to account. It will make us and continue to make changes that are needed. So I urge all in this chamber to reflect on what I said at the beginning, being both individual residents and councillors, so we can come together to support this response, to support our residents, and to support those who lost everything on that terrible night. It is now all of our responsibility and duty to do this and to support our response to the inquiry. Thank you.
I now invite Councillor Simmons to speak. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The majority party has enjoyed total impunity since 1965. Impunity to approve any decision on any committee and in any back room. So there is no collective responsibility here. Valid, legitimate, democratic dissent can be safely disregarded or mocked or punished. The responsibility for Grenfell and for the abuses that preceded and succeeded it belongs on one side of this chamber. I'm not saying that to be horrible, that's just what it is. So where do we go from here? Well, I welcome the report and its amendments, which represents a huge step in the right direction. I welcome the methodology of listening to residents, and I welcome the spirit in which the officers have produced this report and the commitments that it contains. I think overall it is a good first step. I do feel sad that the ward councillors' time and input was initially omitted and that there were further omissions. And although I try to understand, I do feel sad about how some of the very behaviours and cultural attitudes criticised by the inquiry have continued to be demonstrated by some lead members during this process. I have to be honest, it does make me question this council's capacity for change. Since 2017, this council has made many commitments, too many of which have not been honoured, including motions unanimously adopted by full council. I was the one who pointed out that what the council is asking of residents is a leap of faith. You are asking the same of their elected representatives, and that is a huge ask, given what we have all experienced over the last 7 years and before. We have kept wishing and hoping that you would change. And as the report acknowledges, we haven't seen or felt that. The residents of North Kensington don't have a choice. You will have heard it said, living in RBKC is like being in an abusive relationship that you can't get out of. The only options are to disengage and put up with whatever you do to them, or to invest their time to keep telling you the same thing over and over again, hoping that this time it might be different. And that's been going on for 7 years. And so, Mr. Mayor, I hope that the leadership can understand why, as a matter of conscience, I cannot vote in favour of the report. I believe that to do so would be a disservice to my constituents. I do sincerely hope that this report can lead to real change, but based upon experience to date, I await to be convinced and therefore reserve my judgment. I hope there can be constructive and respectful ways to work across the council and that we can rebuild trust, but we are not there yet. And I think you all, in your heart of hearts, know why that is. I think and hope that what we all want for ourselves and for each other, but most of all for our residents, is for there to be genuine healing and restoration. And I hope that everyone here tonight will be willing to do what it takes towards finding a way to work together in good faith, which I believe is the only way to address the worst excessives of the imbalance of power within this council. So I would like to ask the leadership to have a think. What could you do now of your own free will that would demonstrate good faith? I can think of a few things. In fact, I've submitted them to the officers, but it's got to come from you. Because that is a stumbling block, good faith and goodwill. With those two things, we can move mountains. So let's talk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I now invite Councillor El Nahi to speak. Councillor El Nahi.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much. Where shall I start? One point, I was going to start where Claire has left, the issue of respect and let's talk. But this evening, listening to our visitor, Mr. Mayor, when they came speaking one after the other, honestly, I felt like a wound is being opened, and it's like the event just happened last week. This disaster, we live it, we experience, we live in that area, we cannot move house. We are living in that community, and the report, the response, what I've read, and I went through it, and so many times the word change in culture is being repeated again, again, again. The change, it can be positive or negative. Moving forward, culture is, you don't need to appoint independent consultants, which is being appointed so many times after 2017. Reviews and consultants and surveys, and our residents are really going through an element of fatigue regarding being asked again and again. We've heard to some of those participants who lost their loved ones, they reliving their trauma, and keep chasing for basic, simple right. I know some of those cases. Children being excluded from school, for some of the bereaved families, which I was attending some of their issues. There is no proper support. They keep chasing about what they are trying to do. We live in Nottingdale. Nottingdale is a priority. This is where Grenfell Tower is. I had the honor to chair the first and last committee, the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee, where I worked through a continuous program of recovery. Up to now, I have no satisfaction of why that committee is being abandoned through restructuring, addressing different area, different culture. The cultural change, being the best, you don't need to refer to consultants. I asked the committee, just look at Michael Porter, who's a lecturer, who's professor at Harvard University. Look at the danger of just being classified to be the best. The best is not just there. You need to have a process. You need to have elements, different factors. What did we learn over the last 7 years? I would love to give bridges to come to Nottingdale. Sometimes you say Kensington, North Kensington. We have bridges. Yeah, okay, let's bring that fixed bridge. Last Sunday, I had a big event organized by Cancer. It's called the Future Fair. I am an academic. I love our children to prosper. Our area suffer incredible inequality. What did I get? That I called it intentionally Future Fair. 1 year planning with the local councillor in the future neighborhood in Lancaster West Estate, where I get Brunel University, Brunel Museum. Brunel is a great achiever in building bridges. Look at the Clifton Bridge between Wales and England. Do I need to build for you a virtual bridge so you can visit me in Nottingdale? You are welcome. I will build it. We need to recognize that our children future, that community, we are traumatized. We need to work with the council to readdress the balance of inequality. So I welcome the changes, the positive changes. As my fellow councillor said, and my leader here with the Labour group, let not be politics in this living for our children, for our community, for our prosperity. This is our future. This is our children's future. Everyone out of school is in danger of being killed, in danger of being... So anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
I now invite Councillor Thalasites to speak. Councillor Thalasites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by welcoming the report and saying thank you to Elizabeth and the other councillors who have helped shape the report, and also, most importantly, to the residents who contributed so much at some of the meetings. And I went to a couple at Morley College, and they definitely helped feed into what we're looking at today. I wanted to pick up on one of the areas that, for which I'm responsible, which is customer service and complaints, and it carries on with a thread that David raised earlier. I saw David last week at Lancaster West, and I know that it's something that's really important to people, especially in Notting Dale, but also across the borough. This has been a journey, our complaints process. When I joined the council, we didn't have a corporate complaints function. That was in 2018, so in 2019 we actually started a complaints department. Since then, we have, in the past couple of years, gathered more and more data about how our complaints are working. A couple of years ago, 66% were being responded to at stage 1 on time, which was nowhere near good enough. It's come up to 75% in the year that we've just finished reporting on. And of course, none of this is much consolation to somebody for whom their repairs have gone really badly. So the individual stories behind that are key, and we need to keep those in mind. Since spring, though, in this reporting year, we're up towards 90%, which is much closer to where our target is. We mustn't be complacent. We can always do better, and our services can always be better. But that's a really tangible area in which there has been change, not just in setting up a department, but in terms of improving our performance over the past 7.5 years. I do think it's still a process, and I want to talk a bit about some of the actions that we've taken to try and get to this point. One of those is our service standards, which were co-designed with our residents, and that underpins everything. I went to some of the co-design workshops at Norwich Hub, which is very, I think, in and around, just outside Notting Dale, but parts of that North Kensington area. Since then, we have used maturity assessments to report internally on how they're working and try to drive how they're embedded. The most important elements of it, though, is still how residents are experiencing the council. This is all about how we treat people. It's a means of setting the terms of engagement. So whether you're a resident group, a business group, a market trader, a voluntary organisation, you should know what you can expect from the council, and hopefully that's competence and care. The other sorts of things that we've been trying to do to make progress on this are around our customer access strategy. One of the things at Morley College that a resident raised was that we should be able to do everything we want to in terms of council engagement through an app. Well, we are developing a CRM, a customer relationship management tool, which will give us the means of having a single view of council services and enable people to report things in a central way, so that will hopefully make things much easier. And then the third piece is visibility. And I know that we all spend lots of time across the borough. So in my ward, I was in Hansard Mews on Friday and speaking to residents in Holland Park yesterday, but also and critically in North Kensington. And just in the last couple of months, I've been to the Space, the Harrow Club, Lanc West, Latimer Road, and I'll be at Norwich Hub again tomorrow. And I think that's probably not uncommon for members across the chamber to be having that level of engagement. I think before I close, the last thing I want to say is, and like I say, this is all kind of trying to respond to the spirit of goodwill and good faith and to demonstrate the tangible actions that we can take, is that we also need to have a vision of where we want to get to. And so for customer service and complaints, I think our vision is pretty simple. It's to become the best, but that means that it should be easy to interact with the council, or certainly much easier than it was before, that we should be helpful wherever possible, and that when we can't help immediately with things, we're straight about what the challenges are and we work together to overcome them. So hopefully this report is a bridge in that journey, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak tonight, and to the residents who have come again tonight and who have engaged throughout the process.
I will now invite Councillor Dr. Ahmed to speak. Councillor, you don't wish to speak? Very well. I'll now move on to Councillor Wade. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The borough systemically failed residents. This failure was multi-level, multi-departmental, and included the failure of the scrutiny system to effectively challenge. Many words of apology have been made, but this cannot begin to redress the emotional and psychological pain and suffering that the bereaved and survivors feel. The response had a lot of words, but I fear that the Council has not made as many significant cultural changes as claimed. Staff associated with the fire have left. Some in authority at the time remain, but essentially there's still a lack of comprehension about the lives that people live, the challenges that they experience, and the recommendations fall short of detail required to provide reassurance. While it's understood that there was a decision to drop the Grenfell Select Committee, it is essential that residents are made aware through improved communication of the different committees that are now have a mandate to scrutinise decision-making engagement and make it easier for residents. It's essential that there's a coordinated support plan in place for years in the future, including mental health. Perhaps housing is just overloaded, but with recent transformation, there are still problems with addressing day-to-day issues, and this extends to all social rented tenants. Although this report is specifically around those affected by Grenfell, we have a weak relationship with social rented landlords, and so are not safeguarding the residents that we nominate to housing association properties. Emergency preparedness and response. I remain concerned about the robustness of the contingency planning and feel that all councillors should be aware of the framework and the scope of the resilience team. There's an over-reliance on social media and the website to inform residents of when meetings and consultations are scheduled. We must look at the methods of how to get information out to residents in a timely manner and not rely on TikTok. This can create barriers, and this should include an update of residents' associations to make engagement and communication better. An independent external review of the culture within the council must be top-down, and the question whether or not the present cabinet system is appropriate and reflects the diversity of the borough and promotes inclusion. To improve diversity and inclusion, I would ask that we examine a committee-based decision-making process. This would make councillors accountable for decisions, thereby ensuring that they both attend meetings, read the reports, and that there's genuine scrutiny and transparency. This would also represent a commitment to inclusion and diversity. Many of the recommendations rely on communication and feedback, and housing officers are the face of the council. They're on the ground. Are the housing officers overstretched? Are they trained? Are they undertaking routine checks on their buildings or estates? How are they handling complaints? To whom are they submitting their complaints? Providing support for complaints is fine, but what is the time frame for response on complaints? The Grenfell project was over budget. This should have been called in for in-depth scrutiny. Budgetary control does not appear to have taken on board the recommendations of the final report of the Procurement Scrutiny Working Group, September 2016, which highlight procurement issues and the way forward, particularly on the issue of overspend on budgets. While it's welcomed that there are changes, we would like more. It is understood that many would want to move forward, but this must be on a firm basis. We have no doubt that there is a willingness, but there must be more than words to ensure that changes are effective and meaningful. Trust has to be earned. We welcome the report, but are unable to support it.
I now call upon Councillor Lowry to speak. Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I want to issue my sort of sincere thoughts with the 2 victims of gun crime in my ward in Golborne this weekend. This is not the first incident this year. I wish for their very speedy recovery. I also wish for the council to work with the police to find a permanent solution to improved patrols and protection and resident safety, and acknowledgement towards the causes of crime. On to the Grenfell report. Mr. Mayor, firstly, thank you to the Council leadership for accepting the Labour Group amendments to the report to include the factual evidence presented by residents and councillors at the last meeting. I have some strong words to say tonight. None of these are personal towards anyone, but as the leadership team, you should hear them. The fact that basic facts were omitted from the report initially is frankly another example of what residents perceive the council being more interested in protecting its own reputation above acknowledging and rectifying its errors in its Grenfell response. Culture is key. The Grenfell Task Force report of 2019 under Baroness Scott outlined that the council had proven examples of, quote, unedifying behaviour, unquote, demonstrated by leadership team and councillors. This unedifying behaviour has since been demonstrated substantially over the following 5 years, including in debates at this council chamber. I'll give a couple of examples later. It was this same Grenfell Task Force report in 2019 that said that the political decision to abolish the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee was misguided. 5 years later, 5 years after that report, the council still finds it difficult to recognise the importance of that committee and to recognise the importance of adequate independent scrutiny. If the council talks about turnout and engagement, well, it doesn't recognise the fact that that committee had the highest turnout of any scrutiny committee since the council scrutiny system actually began operating. That's just some food for thought. The council continues to demonstrate its failure to follow its commitments in the Charter of Public Participation through its engagement with residents and its commitments in the Hillsborough Charter. Now, these two constitutional items were passed for different reasons after the fire. One, the Hillsborough Charter, was to make sure that the council leadership had some sort of responsibility and acknowledged where it went wrong and goes wrong. And the Charter for Public Participation was passed to make sure the council engages with residents in co-design in its planning and major development. Now, the council is both a planning and a licensing authority, so those are two elements in which the council can actually demonstrate that it's listening. Now, most notable is the failure to commit to co-design and taking steer from residents in major works as promised through this charter. And a perfect example is the attempt after Grenfell to vandalise Trellick Tower and the Cheltenham estate without the consent of residents or any attempted co-design. What happened? That attempt to vandalise the estate in Goulburn was thrown out by the previous government and their planning inspector. And this demonstrates another example of how this council considers itself above the law in dealing with its residents. It is an example of unedifying behaviour. This is not the first time I've mentioned this issue. It must have been about 2 years ago when I was speaking against that development. At the same meeting, residents were here as well, when the deputy leader said that I should be ashamed. Now, I've never ever attacked the deputy leader of this council on a personal basis at a meeting, but the way he attacked me and therefore my residents as well, who held the same position, is an example, in my opinion, of unedifying behaviour. You also should acknowledge the mental health deterioration of residents in North Kensington when you continually fail to acknowledge the fact that major works have detrimental impacts on them when they do not have their support. So, if the leadership team of the council wants to genuinely demonstrate its commitment to change, as it has said it will tonight, it could start by throwing out the plans to build skyscrapers on Kensal Canal side with just 14% social housing, against the wishes of all local residents' associations, amenity societies, and the vast majority, if not all, residents. The planning inspector in her report said the council must consider the Grenfell Phase 2 report in all its planning decisions going forward. Therefore, this is a Grenfell-related issue. There is no resident I've spoken to in North Kensington who doesn't want more social housing, but then we must build social housing. And that means acknowledging that the Kensal Canal side plans as they stand are flawed and incompatible with the Charter for Public Participation. If you want to commit to change, you can start by committing to protect Canal Side House, a building used by dozens of our most needed voluntary sector organisations. You can protect it from demolition, as what would happen if the Kensal Canal site plans are passed. If the council, at the very least, cannot commit to these, then it demonstrates a continued failure to adhere to its own constitutional policies, and therefore an ongoing contempt for the people's promise to serve. In conclusion, we cannot support and vote in favour of the paper tonight, because the council still needs to genuinely commit to investing in its relationship with the community. We need to see Grenfell recovery scrutiny back, alongside independent scrutiny. We need a real reconsideration of how major works are done, including planning and development, and a complete overhaul of council-tenant relations.
I'll now call upon Councillor Wheel to speak. Councillor Wheel.
Thank you. For the OSC, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Grenfell is first and foremost in our priorities and our work plan every year. And that was exemplified by the fact that we had two meetings relating, first of all, to the report and the very beginning thoughts about how to respond to it, and then on the report itself. I think the report is in many ways a masterly and detailed analysis of what went on. And I'm sure everyone had a bit of that report that really struck home to them. And for me, as I said in a previous committee, it was a line about how our housing safety and building control should have been the last and final defence for residents and failed. And I think when I look at the report and I look at our response to it, that is the line that stays with me. In sheer terms of turnaround time, I think this report is a masterly achievement, a remarkable achievement. In particular, there are some officers who have worked very, very long hours to turn it round. But mainly, and there's the external team who came in to help us with engagement, and of course, above all, the residents who gave their time and energy after everything that's happened to feed into this response. And to them, I know that we are all grateful. In many places, this is a candid and comprehensive report, and it's clear about what progress has been made and what progress still needs to be made. But I think that is the aspect that as a scrutiny committee we focused on, and that's what more needs to be done. And there were 4 areas that we dwelt on. One was consultation. I think we've learned a lot by having the external team here to help us with the consultation on the report, on the response to the report. And, you know, I think that's a note to us as a council to know when to ask for help and external input. We talked about data, and I was really pleased to see the final report accepts our recommendation that we should have a comprehensive data strategy as a council, not only so we know more about our residents and can respond to them better, but also so that we can monitor our own progress and be more critical about ourselves as we go on and more transparent. We talked about accountability. And that was because residents said at the meeting we need to think a bit wider than the scope of the report about equality and treating people fairly, and that too is a point taken up in the response. But I think the most important one, and I won't be the first and I won't be the last person to mention it here, is culture, organisational culture. And I know from my own working life that this is actually an incredibly difficult thing to achieve. You have to reach into every single corner of the organisation. But we know that it's absolutely crucial to being a good, responsive councillor. I think it's always exemplified by me, I think it was a Little Britain sketch, the computer says no. On the front line, that is something that we never want to hear, and as consumers and residents ourselves, we never want to hear it. But only the other day, I, as a ward councillor, had a terrible example of that with our complaints department, if I'm being totally honest about this. And so we know that we have got more to do, and I hope that, like everyone else here, I'm resolved to play my part in helping to facilitate that cultural change.
I will now call upon Councillor Dentcode to speak. Councillor Dentcode.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember the Kroll report of 2021 on the purchase of Warnington College, which criticised the council heavily for, among many other things, deliberately excluding ward councillors from consultation or indeed any information relating to that project. North Kent councillors continue to be excluded from information relating to council property transactions and plans in their ward, and while I see the updated response is slightly improved, we are barely mentioned in the response. We are regularly kept in the dark about the council's intentions. Canalside House, we've been hearing about Unit 12, Latimer Road, and the complete and utter mess of the Maxilla City building, unused for 10 years, apart from a brief community takeover after the fire, for which, of course, the community was evicted by the council, and it's been empty ever since then. Councillors in poorer ward have little or no agency in the areas they have been elected to serve, yet majority party councillors expect us to accept collective responsibility as part of the council for their actions. No. We councillors have specialist knowledge of our areas, and yet we are regularly in committee meetings and in full council derided, discredited, undermined and treated with rudeness and contempt. This goes far beyond political banter. It is unedifying. So we ask you to respect, listen to and work transparently with ward councillors in North Kent who are elected by the communities and are part of the Grenfell affected communities ourselves. We are all traumatised too. The council's response states the intention to get to know, learn to understand communities as if North Kent is a foreign country inhabited by aliens. Social tenants, and especially those of non-white British background and people on low incomes, are still treated as a different species that must somehow be tolerated, patronised and even controlled. I can almost hear the David Attenborough voiceover as lead councillors venture into the territory or enter the lion's den, as the deputy leader once called us to a visitor. It's not engagement at any level. Our communities are not viewed equitably. And given that over 54% of residents across the borough are from migrant or refugee backgrounds, it's time for the council to come to terms with this. Another issue. The inquiry revealed that the head of building control was forced to let 3 staff members go and then had to take on their work as well as his own with a caseload of 130 projects. He eventually resigned 3 months before the fire due to unbearable stress. The council's response blames him. But the council cut the budget control budget by more than half between 2009 and 2016. In that same period, the council was content to cover net losses totalling £5.8 million for Opera Holland Park, a sum the then Cabinet Member for Finance said was chicken feed. The council continues to provide free office space, free storage units and free use of the Southern Terrace in Holland Park, despite the Opera being well past its deadline for financial self-sufficiency. It's a story, a familiar story, of indefensible financial priorities, and the council should own up to them and not blame officers for their mistakes. The Grenfell Jasna Refresh 2024 notes that between 2029 and 24, the NHS, CNWL and RBKC spent £100 million on Grenfell recovery. There is a shocking lack of progress revealed by residents in the report, and ONS figures show that physical and mental health outcomes are worsening in Nottingdale as elsewhere. As we have heard numerous times, many residents feel abandoned. Where on earth was this money spent? The concerns about the potential effects of toxic air, dust and soil have never been taken seriously. Residents suffer specific health problems they attribute to this toxicity, and they are regularly gaslighted for it. Where is the help for them? To this end, in addition to the independent panel which is being discussed to scrutinise the council's progress on culture, the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee must be reinstated, led by North Kent councillors and residents, to bring all these issues into one place and enable proper scrutiny and accountability. Splitting oversight between the different committees was warned against, as we've heard, by the Grenfell Task Force This mistake must be remedied. There has been no systemic change. I cannot support this report. Thank you.
I'll now call upon Councillor Benton to speak. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with words of one syllable. We are sick of this. We're sick of your empathy. We're sick of your apologies. We're sick of your promises. We're sick of beautifully worded documents full of compassionate understanding. And we're sick of, we really, really, really get it this time. We're sick of being told that we councillors are part of this council only when these people want to dilute responsibility. I'm sick of being told how to relate to and listen to the community that I don't just represent, I am literally a part of. Nobody, absolutely nobody, believes that any document produced by this council, however comprehensive, strategic, rigorous, compassionately expressed, represents even a step towards anything substantive. Not anymore. In fact, this council has formed, publishing some report or adopting some noble charter and adopting it as a fig leaf for their continued inaction and immiseration. They can publish whatever they like. I say they've long since squandered any right to be taken at their word, and as such we refuse to co-sign anything from their office. The people of Kensington have been mugged off for too long. We are sick of being mugged off. Still, we have utterly nebulous talk of culture change, the same references to wafty and unmeasurable vibes-based ambitions. When asked what culture means in a public meeting, the leader of this council told residents that it amounts to a feeling. Here's another phrase of one syllable. Where is the stuff? What in our budget is ring-fenced for the fixing of our broken services? Something like portobello measures which are just consistently abandoned because they're unpopular, because the people that live and work there don't want them. Well, that's safe, but a few million for that. But what about our services? Look at the Housing Ombudsman's report and the case studies that are part of it. The executive may be horrified by these cases, as they should be, but these are absolutely commonplace on this side of the chamber. Where is the commitment of this council to hiring staff, not cutting even more, as is currently on the table? How can we take a cabinet seriously when cutting library hours, reducing SEND provisions with no alternative presented, and stretching the workforce we have even further, top the list of consulted on budget provisions? The leader just said that it may be more important how we do things than what we do. I find that very informative. Oh, that's right, we'll have staff training. Training is all well and good for a functional, well-resourced workforce, but when we have one officer assuming the commitments of what used to be 4 or more, routinely stonewalled by equally stretched adjacent departments, still expected to hit the same target, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, being told to come in on a weekend so that a 26-year-old can tell you how you're actually racist is not going to have the effect you think it will. Where is the stuff? I finally wish to point out some of those lead members can't help themselves. At last month's all-members meeting, most were okay. Some may even have listened to the representatives of these wards and the people affected by the debate we were having. But the deputy leader then, in the course of delivering a characteristically self-serving anecdote about what a fantastic guy he is, saw fit to inform us all that in fact he knows this council is doing better. Forget everything you experience. Forget what you see with your own eyes. You're too stupid to understand how good you have it. Know your place, be grateful. This is the true face of compassionate conservatism. Kensington is sick of it. Enough.
I will now call upon Councillor Addenbrooke to speak. Councillor Addenbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since the release of the report, I've been reflecting on the findings, and in particular about the relationship between the council and its residents we serve. Our residents should quite rightly feel the council is working to support them, but it's clear that this was not happening in 2017, and I am sorry for the failings the inquiry has found. We have worked to address this through the establishment of the Communities Department and the introduction of the Charter for Public Participation, for which I would like to thank Councillor Siren for leading on. As Nabil said earlier, the Grenfell Partnerships team and the dedicated service are exemplars on working with and understanding the communities we serve, and most importantly, how all our residents should be treated. So it is my hope and aim this will be spread across the council. We have made progress. We consult more, we engage more, some say too much, we listen more, but I know there is much more to do. The commitments set out in the inquiry about refreshing the Charter for Public Participation and citizens panels are key parts of this. The work so far has helped us to focus and improve, but we have much more work to do if we are to become the best. Too many of our residents still feel disconnected from council decision making, and I really want to change this. Crucially, I want all our residents to feel the council is on their side. We are in public service to serve our residents, all of our residents, and it's important all our communities feel and see this. Mr. Mayor, while we have consulted on the inquiry report and from the feedback we get at public meetings and complaints, it's clear that some of our residents still don't feel supported. Questions have been raised about discrimination of all different kinds, so we must look this in the eye and improve the culture across the organisation, and I look forward to the review. And I hope this will be a key moment for the community and the council, and it will shape the nature and tone of our relationship for the better for years to come. The report proposes strengthening scrutiny, so it's really important Grenfell matters are embedded across our select committees and not siloed in one committee, so it becomes part of our DNA. Mr. Mayor, we have welcomed Labour's amendments, and to me this has highlighted that this is not about politics. This is about doing the best for our residents. And Claire, please don't shake your head at me. We all really want to do the best for our residents. And we can only do this if we work together. So I support the commitments we have made, and I am confident the effective delivery of this programme will create a fitting legacy from Grenfell here at the Council. Our residents deserve nothing less, and I hope all in the Chamber tonight will support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I will now invite Councillor Bakhtiar to speak. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Section 3 of the Local Governments Act 1999 requires local authorities in their role as the best value authority to consult when making decisions of achieving best value. Public participation in the decision-making process is the key element in a real democracy. Despite the availability of the resources, RBKC's consultations had been mismanaged and very poorly conducted before and after the fire. Survivors and residents have frequently criticized RBKC for conducting consultations that felt tokenistic, and thus it's obvious that all consultations had been superficial efforts. Our voices are not genuinely heard or acted upon in decisions affecting housing and safety improvements. For instance, when I was a member of the Housing Committee, I have suggested to install triple glazing for all the side for the side of building facing St. Anne's Road at Henry Dickens Court. It was agreed that this was going to happen. But when the renovation started, the residents were surprised that all windows were double glazed only. When I inquired about this change, I was told that they were too expensive and that it wasn't going to reduce the noise pollution, which is untrue. I have reported a big leak. Another example, I have reported a big leak affecting 4 flats in Longlands Court in Colville Ward in August this year. 4 months later, one of the flats hasn't been repaired, which led to mice and rat infestation. The builders started working yesterday because I have chased the housing department again. Mr. Mayor, the council's reputations among residents remains damaged due to its perceived failure to engage meaningfully, which stems from its history of negligence leading up to Grenfell fire. This mistrust affects consultations as residents, and residents doubt the council's intentions and effectiveness. These patterns highlight systematic issues within the RBKC's approach to consultations, which continue to hinder recovery efforts and community trust. Experts and residents have called for improved practices to ensure inclusive, transparent, and impactful consultations going forward. I have shared my views of a unique way of rectifying this problem with the Council's former Chief Executive, Mr. Barry Quirk, in 2020 and 2021. And he listened to me carefully, and he said that he liked the idea, but he didn't follow it up. I have also reached out to our new Chief Executive, asking to meet with her to explain this new approach, but I did not get a response, unfortunately. The following is my suggestion. We have about 2,500 council officers who work directly for the council. Imagine if we could train half of that number and task them to canvass the 18 wards in the borough in 1 or 2 days each year. We could call this Residents' Engagement Week. We could have 50 to 70 officers per ward, depending on the ward size of that ward. I am sure that with this number, we could conduct the best public engagement anywhere in the country, if not in the world. We could have a 10-point questionnaire to ask our residents and to ask for their input. We could involve volunteers from the borough to participate in this as well. Kensington and Chelsea is a unique borough in the country, and we have the biggest man-made disaster since World War II. Therefore, we need to think outside the box and be creative. By doing this, we will set an example in the country and open the pathway for a wave of new, creative, and brave ideas. This project will provide an amazing opportunity for our officers to get to know the borough they have been working for, and to form their very clear understanding of our residents' concern directly and without any political interference or prejudice.
Councillor Bakhtiar, could you please conclude?
Will do. We could apply this new method on a much smaller scale whenever needed. I will be more than happy to share my views on this with the Chief Executive and the leadership of the Council if they are really looking to solve this chronic problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I will now invite Councillor Kamali to speak. Councillor Kamali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fundamentally, the purpose of the state is to keep its citizens and its residents safe. The state failed through us, and we failed through the state. Our role here collectively is to ensure that never happens again. And I look to a line in the report where it says, "The failures in building control cannot be repeated, nor can we allow commercial considerations or industry practices to compromise our fundamental duty to protect public safety through robust enforcement or building regulations." On recent visits with our building control team, visiting our new homes coming out of the ground at Balby, it's clear that we have a number of officers, a huge number of officers, that also want to take up the challenge of being the best. It's not just our residents that seek that, nor the councillors here, but also our officers. I think we're pushing at an open door. We as councillors have a duty to make sure that our officers are helping us get there, but likewise the officers also have to help us to get there. Perhaps sometimes I push a little too hard at that door, but I know that there are willing volunteers on the other side working hard to get us there. David mentioned that we were once perceived as sort of a flagship council, and that sort of stuck out for me, because a flagship is something other ships would look to understand what's coming next, what the future holds, but also what's the best thing to do. And I think that's really the challenge for this council as we look to the future. It's to be that flagship, not just for our residents, but actually for other boroughs, to look to us for best practice, to see how what would Kensington and Chelsea do in this situation should become the default across the United Kingdom. So I think that's really my takeaway from this evening. We have to look back and make sure that we never repeat those mistakes again, but we also have to look to the future to make sure that we are leading and that others can then follow us and we can have a safer and brighter future for everybody. So thank you.
I will now invite Councillor Dr. Ahmed to speak. Councillor Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess what's really remarkable from this evening is the speed with which we've moved from the self-flagellation a month ago to this self-congratulation now all of a sudden about being, reminders of being a flagship, this talk of being the best council. I cannot tell you how painful it has been for me for the last 2 to 3 years coming to these meetings every month and hearing some members of the council talking about being the best. The immediate community around Grenfell Tower do not need you to be the best, they just want you to be satisfactory. I think it shows an enormous disconnect between the lived experience of a lot of residents in that part of the borough that you are still talking about wanting to be the best. It's frankly offensive. So since the publication of the inquiry report, there's been a lot of time for reflection. There have been 2 public meetings, 3 OSCs, multiple meetings with the Grenfell partnership team with the Notting Dale councillors, which have been very helpful. And yeah, lots of public discussion and also with public health as well. And the key messages that have come through from residents is that 1, there's a lack of any formal accountability structures, and this has enabled the council to carry on with total impunity. And it's this which is at the heart of the mistrust with the council. It's similar to, it kind of speaks to what Naheed was talking about earlier, of criminals being left to be in charge of a crime scene. And what else came through is that this is a council that has been essentially determined to evade scrutiny over the last couple of years. So I do welcome some of the references in the recommendations to strengthening the scrutiny arrangements, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. I mean, when you think about the lack of trust that exists already and the way in which the inquiry report spoke about the nature and seriousness of the council's failures continuing in the last 7 years, and for there to have been no adequate measurable changes since that time, it's meant that this council has lost the right to scrutinise itself or the right to hold itself to account. So I was really hoping that this response would be able to spell out how those particular points would be addressed. And there is actually very, very little detail. There's talk about independent external review of culture, but there is no reference at all to what the scope of that review or what the terms of reference or what the remit of it will be. Independent advisory panel, similarly, very vague. The strengthening of the scrutiny measures, all it talks about is Overview and Scrutiny Committee will receive quarterly progress reports on the implementation of commitments made in this response. So all of the stuff that's being promised now, similar to the promises that have been made over the last 7 years, there's really no way to be going back to review how these recommendations are being implemented and to hold the council to account as to when that is. Unfortunately, the view is that that's inevitably what's going to be happening. So it's simply not enough. And I spoke at the last council meeting about there being a huge disparity between how the council kind of views itself and the experiences of some of the residents in North Kensington. And the inquiry report itself spoke about that before the fire, residents' views were ignored or minimised, their day-to-day concerns were belittled and brushed aside, and they were not treated with the courtesy and respect that was due to them. I really would invite councillors on the other side of the chamber to attend some of the surgeries that we have in Nottingdale so that you can hear directly how precisely these experiences, views ignored, their concerns minimised, day-to-day concerns belittled and brushed aside, how that is still a day-to-day experience of our residents. We hold our surgeries twice a month, which is sort of double what happens in other sides of the borough, actually. So with that additional time, you're very welcome to come and sit in some of our surgeries, just so that you can hear directly what some of those experiences involve. So, unfortunately, I won't be able to vote in support of this proposal. It's far too vague, and the good faith that's needed in order to sort of vote through something with so little that addresses the concerns that have been raised in the public meetings and in the full council meeting last month. The fact that there is so little to address that in terms of specifics, specifically about external scrutiny and accountability, that means
Councillor
that I won't
Dr.
be able
Ahmed,
to,
could you conclude?
That's why I won't be able to support it. Thank you.
I now invite Councillor Noor to speak. Councillor Noor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll begin by thanking all the speakers who came tonight to the full chamber with their valuable time and contribution. I'm speaking tonight not just about the Grenfell response phase 2 report, but to challenge the council to deliver a genuine, measurable change in housing, education, supporting youth, adult health, social care, keeping our community safe, and working with all councillors and other stakeholders to build and strengthen relationship with our residents. Mr. Mayor, Grenfell tragedy exposed failure in all elements of the council, failure that cost lives and shattered communities. Moving forward is not just an opportunity to grow, but it is an obligation we cannot fail to meet. Mr. Mayor, rebuilding trust, as the report mentions, is more than promises. The Council speaks of fostering open communication, using restorative approaches, but let's be honest, residents have heard promises before. Trust cannot be built with words alone. It requires action, accountability, and a willingness to confront the painful realities of the past. The Council claims to want to understand the lived experiences of residents, particularly ethnic diversity individuals and those with disabilities. But understanding requires more than collecting data. It requires dismantling the systematic barriers that led to inequality. Public participation must mean power sharing. We'll only succeed if the Council is willing to share the power with our residents, to be equal partners in shaping decision-making which affects their lives. Recognizing bigger picture, confronting persistent inequality, Grenfell was a tragedy born out of inequality, neglect, disregard for our residents' voices. Yet despite promises of change, many of the same issues persist today. Residents still speak of poor housing condition, racial and social discrimination, and exclusion from decision making. Mr. Mayor, going forward, a culture of accountability and humanity is essential. The proposed independent external review of the council culture is essential, but it cannot be a token exercise. It must lead to specific time-bound action that are publicly tracked and monitored. Our vision must be rooted in accountability. The council says it wants a culture based on fairness, respect, humanity, but residents are still asking when they will see this. What concrete steps will be taken to ensure that no one feels ignored or excluded? Ultimately, the legacy of Grenfell must be one of justice, not symbolic, but tangible change. The council must prove that it has learned from the past by delivering results that residents can see, feel, and trust. This is your moment to demonstrate a courage leadership. Let this legacy be one of action. Thank you very much.
I will now call upon Councillor Jeddat to speak. Councillor Jeddat.
Thank you. I honestly don't know where to start, and possibly I will just start from my casework 2019, just to illustrate how quickly we moved away. And actually we didn't move away. We want to move away, but we are stuck in the same attitude towards our residents, to whom we have duty of care, to whom we have to go according to human rights, respect them, we correct their rent, we correct their service charge. And having Grenfell tragedy happening in the most privileged borough, and having the most recent Kensington and Chelsea Foundation report still showing that there is no change whatsoever, I just would like to illustrate how can we actually say that there is improvement in moving forward from this what happened in the past. So as a newly elected councillor, I picked up some old cases. 2019, still going 2024. Resident is disabled, has a wife, sick, 4 children, damp and mold. We managed to produce beautiful brochure. What can we do for you as a council? Unfortunately, the gentleman has £5,000 bill. Nobody comes forward to help with it. Well, it's legal matter, go to solicitor, let's deal with it that way. That solicitor's matter, council washes hands. Stage 1, 2, 4, solicitor will deal with it. 2021, far before my time, Nottingbarn estate. It's a small estate in Dalgano. There was a resident who suffered from heart attack and fire brigade couldn't enter. Why couldn't enter? Because council allowed, officers allowed cars to park in a way that not fire brigade or ambulance getting in. He got a heart attack and he passed away. Residents feel just simply literally disgusted with the attitude of this council. For them, this resident is number 73 victim on your list. Your negligence goes on because you didn't take care for this life. You didn't take care of complaints going from very long time. On the same estate, 2022, there was a fire because of a heat wave. Again, cars were parking in the way nobody could come in. I've been complaining, going to Twitter, going to your offices, nothing happened. Get what? Again, there was no access to put the fire out. And this is the Grenfell setting. So how can you tell about changes and you ask us to literally approve what you are saying here and that we are happy to move forward and you promise that you will comply and all sorts of wonderful things going to happen, like Father Christmas. July 22, after my election, I was helping a lady who had a special needs, domestic violence survivor, honor killing survivor with 3 children wandering on our streets, sleeping in toilets, and our social services were literally treating her like unnecessary baggage for the council, getting the taxi out of this borough, hoping that she will never return again. And guess what? You did strangle 3 children a few times in the places when we didn't have even money from a cash point because Holiday Inn was literally in a remote space. Kids didn't go to school for months. This is under your current 2022. Where is your change? Lack of adaptation. One of my residents, guess what, goes to council and asks for adaptation, walk-in shower, simple repair, right? Or adaptation and repair, because in the kitchen it's another thing. Guess what? He goes to Almaty to shower for 5 years. How it's possible, under your watch, someone who is near Grenfell goes to shower to Almaty for 4 years, and you know he cannot walk in because you offered him ground for flat. What about our community assets? Dalgano Trust leased out for 50 years. Nothing for Sundays, Saturdays for children. You are surprised that people go into gangs culture and just literally have nowhere else to go, right? So congratulate yourself of helping our young children and young people to keep away from a gang culture. One of another kind of cases, ex-gang member wants to move on in his life. He told you clear, I cannot go to this place, which you offered him as a housing, because I will not come out of there alive. You know very well, you're working with local police about war, postcode war. What did you offer him? You offered him exactly in a spot he told you he cannot go. How can you say, I listened to my residents? You jeopardized his life. New development. New development, wonderful brochures. We have so much on your Kensington and Chelsea website. And guess what? There is fire alarm ringing for days and you didn't accept that this is your responsibility. You blame, well, developers. I really don't know what to say about the most recent summit. This is a
Councillor
brochure
Jeddah, could you
which we
please
picked up.
conclude?
It was printed in 2012 and refers to what TMO, your TMO attitude to us goes on. How can you accept your work? You have absolutely no respect for us as a councillors, no respect for our residents, even those who have small children. Thank you.
I'll now call upon Councillor Siren to speak. Councillor Siren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted firstly to thank everyone who came to speak tonight and everyone who's contributed to the response. The council response does outline important changes that have happened at the council, but we continue to hear the same message that we've heard for 7 years, and actually we've heard it for a lot longer than that. And a lot of this is around the culture of the council. I did feel quite sad to read the response, as I think we all hoped and willed that more progress would have been made in this area. And I wanted to make a couple of comments, which I hope will help us think about where we go from here. I was struck by a comment made by Grenfell United at our last council meeting about how all of us need to have a deep knowledge and understanding of Grenfell and the North Kensington community. And for me, this is about spending time with our trusted partners and community organisations and ward councillors and learning from our residents. We need to know our residents and spend time with them and understand the challenges that they face. And I've also found that our residents are very generous with their offer of help and to work with us. And we've heard it again tonight from some of the bereaved. I do think that alongside understanding is kindness, and I think that should be at the heart of our culture, and I think that's what our residents want to see. Many of our residents only come into contact with the council when they're in a state of distress or they have concerns. Yes, the demands on council services will continue to increase, but if the starting point is kindness and care, and we demonstrate an ability to act on the concerns that we hear with competence, then we at least start in the right place. I also reread our Charter for Public Participation, which we adopted in 2019 as part of our journey for change after the tragedy. And it says that we will involve local people in decision making and give opportunities for residents to get involved and share feedback with councillors. And I think these words are still very true today, but they do need to result in action our residents can see on the ground. I hope we can all agree on that. And not that our residents and we will always agree, but our differences and our diversity are our strength. Mr. Mayor, I do think it is up to each and every one of us in this chamber to ask what we are doing in our roles in the council, whether it's through casework, on scrutiny committees, or other committees that we sit on to lead change. And I do think we need to be unified in our intent, and this is what is being asked for by the bereaved and the survivors for the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll now call upon Councillor Will to speak. Councillor Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be brief because I wasn't planning to speak. Firstly, I just want to add my thanks to everyone who came from the community to speak tonight, everyone from the community who's contributed to this report, and to officers for turning it around so quickly. Of course, it's not perfect. It never could be, but it is a start, and it is important. I also wanted to thank and acknowledge Councillor Dr. Ahmed's invitation to come to a surgery in Nottingdale. I would be more than happy to do that, and I'm sure other colleagues in leadership team would be happy to do the same. I think it's really important to go up there and hear what residents have to say there and get out of our own wards. And I also have been listening really very carefully to what everyone said tonight, and lots of really good and thoughtful comments. I was particularly struck and grateful for Councillor Simon's comments actually about goodwill and good faith. I think that was really important. And I thank her for that. But I am disappointed that some of her colleagues, on a tonight of all nights, which is not about us, it's about Grenfell, it's about our residents, felt that it was appropriate and to be so personally critical of the deputy mayor, the deputy leader. He would be the first person to say that he hasn't always got everything right, and he's far from perfect. But I can't think of there were many people who've spent as much time with those directly affected by Grenfell as he did in the weeks and months afterwards. And as I say, I just feel that tonight just wasn't a night to be getting into those personal issues and grudges, especially when you've all talked about respect and goodwill and good faith. So, thank you.
I'm now going to call upon Councillor Ali to speak.
Judging the time, Mr. Mayor, I will pass this one. Thank you.
Very well, Councillor Ali. In that case, I will call upon Councillor Taylor-Smith to sum up. You have 5 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Will, for coming to my defence, although my shoulders have always been broad, less so the opposition party. So, Mr. Mayor, can I just thank everybody, the colleagues and everybody who's come to this chamber to give their heartfelt contribution today, those that have spoken. I've got a little paragraph in my notes saying mention comments made by others in the chamber, but I'll do that quickly. I want to reference Nabil. Now, Nabil was the first person that laid this challenge down of being the best council. I'm sorry that Councillor Adams finds that offensive, but that was just fact. And he was also, it was nice to hear his acknowledgement that we're including issues such as discrimination, and gave credit in terms of our apologies and our repairs, and his wish that this would extend in terms of other parts to the council. Then I think reference, Kasim, the leader of the council, talked about in his opening speech about the importance of working together. Absolutely agree with that. And also his belief that with work we can actually be the best council. Sof then talked about housing, which is the heart of all the meetings that I went to on the discussions on the makeup of this report were about housing. And I think that's actually the heart of really what we've really got to attend and deal with. And just because we're spending a lot of money doesn't make it different when somebody's sitting there with scaffolding around them. And then Claire, Councillor Simmons, again, I was quite impressed, I was quite encouraged by the initial welcome and the huge step and the reference to making a good first step and the importance of us working together. And then the wheels off the proverbial bus started to come off. And there was obviously, it came as a bit of a surprise that given this report, and this is a report, foundation of which is from talking to people and residents views, that it could be dismissed by saying, I'm not going to support it. But anyway, Mr. Mayor, I'll continue on. So politics, as we all know, can be very antagonistic, and two opposing sides with differing views on the right way to go forward. But tonight, I had emphasis on the word hope, that we would put politics aside on this and come together as one and agree to a lasting legacy for this council for Grenfell. And on page 43, I'd like to quote, and please respect, as it's a word you often use to me, even referring to a biblical reference to the lion's den as being somehow discriminative, but anyway, I'll let that go. So page 43, I quote, "This report is not the end point. It is just another step of the journey." And so we welcomed the amendments that were put forward by the Labour completely, and we've accepted them completely inside because we wish to put politics aside for the good of our residents. So, Mr. Mayor, my hope is that the opposition party does the same. Cross-party collaboration is a force for good. Together, we will give voice to those who have lost their voices and we don't hear from. But, Mr. Mayor, there's always more we can do. The whole report talks about what we can do. And as Mr. Eddie Defand said recently in this chamber, we must understand the DNA of North Kensington and understand the lived experience. And I wholeheartedly agree with this. I accept the invitation to come to a surgeries, and I have always endeavoured to understand what goes on at Northwick. Page 38, another quote. "We need to ensure more routine presence in the community, review training and build a better understanding of lived experience." It's in the report if you choose to read it. "And to govern, we must truly understand the issues of the people that we represent. And a fitting legacy will be to embed the wishes of North Kensington in the future decision of the Council." So this report does. Mr. Mayor, Grenfell has defined my role as a councillor. In June 2017, I was a new councillor and unsure whether or not this was for me, whether or not it could actually make a difference. But it all changed when Elizabeth asked me to be the deputy leader, and all of a sudden, I was thrust into one of the greatest crises in the country I've ever seen for decades. And my first step on this journey was the acceptance that I was representing a council that had utterly failed our residents, not for a crisis that I had anything to do with, the failure to listen, the failure to protect, the failure to respond, and the council was broken. And from that moment, we had to take ownership of that, and I still take ownership of that. And some people on the other side of the House should take some ownership too, but I won't go there. And to commit to create something positive. So, Mr. Mayor, Elizabeth highlighted in her speech that we made significant changes, and for me, none more than taking housing management back under control. But today, it is a fundamental change. We have listed in the report
Councillor Taylor-Smith, could you please conclude?
Okay, well, can I just say, Mr. Mayor, I will conclude by saying that last month you cut me off in full flow. And I actually had a complaint from the council up saying that the point that I was making was very important, and it was this point about being on the bus. And with your indulgence, I'd ask you if you could just give me the time that I should have spent before. So anyway, I'm very grateful for the metaphor about the bus, because today it is all about councillors across the chamber, and you have the opportunity tonight to get on this bus. Hesitantly, I understand. Apprehensively, I understand. But more importantly, it's getting on the bus
Mr. Mayor,
together.
Could you please call the meeting to order, because we are all on equal footing here, and the self-righteousness of the way that the Deputy Leader is speaking is really...
Councillor Taylor-Smith, you've had 5 minutes. I'm going to ask you to very, very briefly conclude.
Okay, I will conclude by just saying that I call on the colleagues across the chamber to get on the bus, don't sit on the fence, don't remain at the bus stop, and this is such an important vote, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask for the names of the people voting to be recorded? Thank you.
Yes.
Please, Councillor Jeddah, please. Please. Can we take a moment? The question to be put to a vote is, does the Council agree with the recommendations as set out on page 31? I'm going to ask all those in favour to raise their hands now. All those against? And any abstentions? I declare the response approved. As it is now approaching 9:30 p.m, standing orders 12 to 22 are deemed to be suspended. I will ask the Chief Executive to call the remaining items, accept motions on the agenda, which will then be put to the meeting without discussion. My apologies. We're going to move to item 11, which is reports from the leadership team. I will now invite Councillor Kamali to propose the reception of the draft statement on gambling policy, and Councillor Campbell to second. Councillor Kamali.
I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Campbell.
I'd like to second, Mr. Mayor.
Would Councillor Kamali like to speak to the report?
Mr. Mayor, very conscious of time, I just want to use these brief moments to thank all the officers. Colleagues will see there's not a huge amount of change, but I know that the officers did go through it line by line to make sure that it is up to date, current, and fit for purpose for the coming 3 years. So really just a thank you from me to the officer team. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kamali. Before continuing, I'm going, as it is approaching 9:30 p.m, to ask the whips to extend the meeting further to allow business to be completed. Councillor Adam Brooke, would you like to move?
What business is left? I think in view of the time, we should, if there's nothing that's urgent, we should end the meeting.
Vote for gambling.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. We haven't voted on the gambling.
Thank you for bearing with me. My proposal is to complete and conclude the item on gambling, item 10, and then if the whips agree to end the meeting, that's agreed. Very well. Councillor Kamali had just spoke. Does any other member wish to speak on the draft statements on gambling? I take that as a no. In that case, does Councillor Kamali wish to sum up?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
In that case, does the Council agree with the recommendation as set out on page 150? All of those in favour? And I will just ask briefly for any of those against and any abstentions. In that case, I declare the policy approved and adopted. In that case, as we've approached 9:30 and the whips have agreed to end the meeting, that concludes the business of this evening's meeting of the Council. The next meeting of the Council is the full Council meeting, scheduled to be held on the 29th of January 2025. Good evening.